So hi everyone, welcome back to this casual conversation. This time I'm sitting together with Marcel. Marcel, hi, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I actually have to admit, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. So I'm probably not the only one. So maybe you can
So a lot of people try to pronounce it in French, probably because my first name is Marcel, but it's Pociot. That would be like the German pronunciation, so quite hard. So
Pociot.
I'll say Pociot.
Pociot. Okay. When you say it with a German accent, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, you're German, of course, which is then the name makes sense. So, I also wanted to ask you. Maybe not everyone who's watching knows who you are, which kind of seems strange, but nevertheless, just to be sure, maybe you want to introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Marcel Pociot. I'm CTO at a company called Beyond Code. We create mostly software tools and video courses for developers, targeted at PHP, a bit Laravel specific. And I've been around mostly the Laravel community for quite a long time now, doing a lot of open source with PHP.
Cool. So did I get it right? You're doing mostly just making tools and screencasts. So you're not doing like, I don't know if I can say it like this, but like boring client work anymore?
We still have 2 clients from when we started the company, but also on our website, we don't promote any client work because we're a very small team. We're 3 people. And so we try to focus more on our products, which is like the holy grail as well.
Exactly.
So
yeah. You're living the dream, basically.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice. You just came back from Laracon, US, where you announced actually 2 things, I think, or at least Laravel Herd also comes to mind, which you worked on as well, but that's not what we're talking about today. I wanted to talk about Native PHP. And maybe you should explain a little bit, what is Native PHP about?
Yeah, so if people have heard about it, the name kind of gives a kind of a false impression. At least that's what I read on Reddit and something like that, but I got to that later. So Native PHP is basically a PHP or a Laravel package. It's kind of a framework and a package both. We currently focus on Laravel because it just makes setting everything up so much easier, but it's basically a package that allows you to write desktop applications with PHP. And there have been a lot of approaches to make this work, but previously, like PHP GTK has been around for years. So the main difference with what we do with Native PHP is that we bundle PHP as a static binary as well with the application, so that the user of your app does not need to have PHP installed on their computer. And then we basically have some sort of drivers, so to say. So Native PHP basically consists of 2 parts. One is the API that allows you to interact with your application. For example, you can create windows, configure the menu bar on macOS, or the actual menu, the system tray, stuff like that. And then there are drivers. So right now I've been working on Electron mostly. And these drivers then expose an API and listen to these methods calls from Laravel. And then they present, for example, the window and stuff like that. So this is then handled on Electron. But if, for example, someone would want to create a purely native implementation in Swift, for example, this could be written in Swift as well. It's just because, as I said, with all the Beyond Code tools that we developed, they are written in Electron. So it just made sense for me to go with Electron for that.
Yeah, I can imagine Electron is also pretty easy because it's cross-platform everywhere out of the box.
Yeah.
But you're also working on Tauri, I read?
Yeah, that's not me personally. That's Simon Hemp. He was working on the Tauri driver or backend. Yeah.
And Tauri, that's is it similar to Electron? Because I'm actually not familiar with it.
Well, the main difference is with Electron, that's like when you hear about Electron apps, you mostly hear that they're bloated and they're so big and you use a lot of memory, and that's because Electron basically ships Chromium with every application. So every Electron app that you use, like VS Code or whatever, ships Chromium as their rendering engine. Which has a couple of advantages because you can be sure that your application looks exactly and behaves the same on Linux and Windows and Mac because it all uses the same rendering engine. And Tauri takes a different approach. They don't ship any rendering engine. They just use the web view that comes with the operating system. So for Mac, it would use WebKit, and for Windows, it would be Edge, I guess it's now. For Linux, it's Gecko. So this makes it a lot smaller and also faster because it doesn't need to ship and load Chrome entirely. But, well, there can be differences in rendering if you take an app and open it in Windows and Mac.
Yeah, just like there are differences between browsers.
Yeah, exactly.
How they render. Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
So that's like the main like bird's eye view difference. Then technology-wise, it's also quite different because Tauri is written in Rust and Electron is purely JavaScript. Yeah.
Okay. So I watched your Laracon talk, and what I was pretty much amazed by was you started from a normal Laravel project and you said composer require, and suddenly you had that application running as a standalone application on your desktop.
Right.
That's pretty cool. That's a pretty nice approach. It's just like plug and play, opt in, and it works. So that's pretty nice.
yeah, I know. Like when I did this talk and I ran through it so many times. Like when I worked on NativePHP, for me it felt like, okay, now it kind of feels like it's just opening in a browser, and it didn't feel that special to me anymore. And I guess from the outside, it also doesn't seem that special, but like under the hood, it doesn't use any of your local PHP. It doesn't use your local Nginx or Caddy or whatever. So this is all being served by NativePHP under the hood using this statically compiled PHP binary. Yeah,
but of course, when you open a window, okay, you could say it's just like a tab in your web browser without the Chrome UI.
Right.
But on the other hand, you also have access to the menu bar. And you can make these, what's the official term, like menu applications? I don't know how it's called, but
it's a menu bar app. Yeah,
right. So pretty quickly you discover that it's more than just a web browser, which is nice.
Yeah, right.
So what I was wondering about, or what I imagine, you wake up one day and you're like, hey, let's just try PHP version of Electron, but not exactly because you support multiple drivers. But hey, I want to write desktop applications with PHP. Is that how it happened?
Not exactly, no. It basically started a couple of years ago, I would say, because it sort of goes into the direction of Laravel Herd, which also makes use of these static binaries of PHP. So just quickly, Laravel Herd is basically a desktop application like Laravel Valet that allows you to serve your local PHP projects, and it has everything bundled into it. So you don't need Homebrew. It uses statically compiled PHP, Nginx, and DNS mask. And so that was always like a dream for me to make this work, like years ago. And I looked at various ways to use Homebrew to compile it, but it always ended up being like way too big and stuff like that. And 2 years ago, I was tinkering with PHP Micro. I don't know. I think you also talked about it briefly here.
Yeah.
It's basically a PHP as API that, again, allows you to bundle, like if you take the PHP binary and a var, You can just smash it together, and then you have like one single executable that contains PHP itself.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in making this work for CLI-based applications. So, for example, I developed Expose, which is pretty much ngrok written in PHP. And the idea of having this available on any computer without the need of having PHP installed was like the main motivation. And this was, I think, 2 years ago. And back then, it didn't really work as expected because a lot of the PHP extensions just couldn't be compiled statically. And then I just forgot about it and moved on. And earlier this year, I saw a tweet from Simon Hemp, who's working on the Tauri implementation. And he tweeted like a short video where he had a Tauri application that started the PHP built-in server or PHP artisan serve. I don't remember exactly. And that's basically what started it. So I reached out to Simon and asked him, hey, how did you compile PHP statically? That's something that I would love to do forever. And that's kind of started the whole thing. So that I then talked with Simon and we figured out how we want to do it, that we should do this together. He's focusing on Tauri, me on Electron. And so, yeah, that was like the start of it.
Pretty nice. So not just waking up one day. It's apparently
not really, no. But to be fair, I think I feel like I'm drawn to like the weirder things in PHP. I like to just see, like my motivation often is just to see if it can be done with PHP, just to see how far we can push the language and see what we can do with it. So,
I mean,
a lot of this just comes from exploring for me.
Yeah. Some things might seem weird today, but imagine in 10 years if it's just the norm and you're the one who pioneered it. So
yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Hey, if I get it right, just to be absolutely sure, if we're talking about native PHP, there's the aspect of like these drivers that PHP can talk to. So basically, it's a PHP wrapper around Electron so that you don't have to deal with Electron itself. And then there's also like being able to run a PHP server within that binary and be able to serve web pages and build like web applications with it as you're used to.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, so it's a wrapper around Electron as the framework. Then it also wraps all the tooling so that you can just use a PHP, like a Laravel command to build your application into a DMG file that you can share with others, or an executable file in Windows with a setup. And so we basically try to abstract all the stuff that basically I have to do manually with Electron, with all the apps that I'm working on, behind some nicer APIs so that you don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
So how much work did you put into that? I can imagine like until you had like the working thing you showed on Laracon 2 weeks ago.
It wasn't actually too much, I would say. So like the trickiest part was making. So there are two tricky parts. The first one was actually getting PHP to compile statically with all the extensions that we needed. Yeah. There is an open source project, which is also what we use for Herd, which is called Statics. I think it's Statics PHP Builder or Statics CLI Builder. I don't know exactly. And it's from a brilliant Chinese developer. I just know him by the name Jerry. I don't know his Chinese name. Yeah. He's fantastic. We've been in touch with him. He had added support for a lot of extensions. And he basically handles the whole logic of compiling PHP into like a single binary file. Yeah. And once this was figured out, it was mostly about serving PHP with your application. So like copying everything to the right folders so that when your application is bundled, it finds all the files. But then there are things like if you ship a database, The database shouldn't be inside your actual application. It should be somewhere in your, like on macOS, it's like an application support directory, so that when you update your app, your database shouldn't be nuked.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And so up to that point, it was pretty tricky. And then once that worked, it's basically just adding more APIs to it. So once all this API functionality worked, it was basically just going through the Electron documentation, taking Electron APIs, and then adding like PHP wrappers on top of it. So, of course, this is pretty much a simplified version, but once we got to the point where we could add these APIs, it wasn't actually that hard.
Gotcha.
But that's only speaking for the Electron driver or whatever. So Simon is still working on the Tauri one because Rust just is a whole different ballgame. I don't know Rust, so I can't be of much help. Tauri, essentially, like the main focus of Tauri is they really want to emphasize that they are very secure.
Okay.
So we have to work around a couple of these things, because when we then run an interpreted language, you can just do unlink whatever, and we completely go around Tauri. There's no security restriction in place there. So for Rust, it's still a lot more work. Also because Tauri just has a bit less APIs than Electron.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if this applies for you, but when I'm working on like a little bit crazier projects or more out of the box projects, there's always this huge motivation when you're trying to solve the core issue, and once that's done, there's this huge amount of polishing work, basically converting APIs. I often lose a bit of motivation at that point, because it's a lot of work, usually the biggest amount of work, and it's not all that interesting once you've tackled the problem. Is this something you have to deal with as well?
At least not right now, because like for me, I was tweeting about this for I think like 2-3 months, and the reactions were always very, very enthusiastic, up to a point also leading to Laracon, where I was like, I'm just going to disappoint everyone, because like the hype is so high. I don't know what people are expecting. And so the main motivation up to that point was just to deliver as much quality as I can for Laracon. There's still a lot, like documentation wise, we only wrote what we could write up to Laracon. I was also on vacation for 2 weeks, so there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done there. But like what I've seen from when was Laracon? 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. Like the main motivation now comes from the community. Like every day I open Twitter, I see people building new apps already with it. Like there's an IP, like it's a simple app. It just shows you the current IP of yours in the menu bar, but it's written in PHP using this thing, and people send PRs with new APIs. So this is really motivating, that people just feel very, very happy to be able to write desktop apps now without having to learn a new thing. So.
Exactly. That's the benefit, right? You don't have to learn anything new. It lowers like the entry level, or I don't know how to say that, but it makes it so much easier to just get started with it. And it might actually inspire quite a lot of people to build cool new stuff that they otherwise would never think about.
Yeah. I haven't actually thought about it this way before Laracon. And then after I gave my talk, Jess Archer, who's also a Laravel team member, came up to me and said, well, you just gave every Laravel developer the ability to write desktop apps.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. I haven't seen it like that, but yeah. So this is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. And I must say, when I watched the talk, I definitely wasn't disappointed. It was the other way around. Yeah, I was like, whoa. Yeah, it was just, look, I know everything was possible with Electron. I have built Electron apps way back, but just realizing that you can do this with PHP now is just, it was very inspiring. Even though you like didn't invent any new base technology or anything, you made it accessible. And that was very inspiring. So yeah, I definitely was. I really liked your Laracon talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. How was the perception in general in the community? It's been 3 weeks now. You've already mentioned quite a lot of people who are very excited. I also noticed some people being a little skeptical, and I think you mentioned you wanted to talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think, well, most of the skepticism that I read about, so like, first of all, I don't try to take any of that personal, because like you can say negative stuff online very easily, especially when it's anonymous and on Reddit. So, but what I've read, most of it, like, of course, you have comments like, oh, well, just use Electron, or this is nothing new, whatever, then don't use it. But most of the negative or skepticism that I read was about the name, which, like, that it's misleading because it's not a real native application, because it's just a wrapper around Electron, or Tauri then.
Yeah.
Which I can understand that people have this perception, but as I said, if someone would want to write a pure Swift or I don't know, whatever Windows-based driver for this, this could just be compiled into a pure Swift application. So it's not like what we give you can only be used with Electron just because that's what we focus on right now.
Yeah, and I guess it all depends on where you're looking, at what your point of view is, because if you say, like, at least that's the way I interpreted it, this is PHP that you can now use to build applications with that run on like the native environment.
Right. Yeah.
So of course, the code itself isn't natively compiled to, I don't know, like Swift or stuff like that. I have no experience with desktop applications, actually. But I guess it's just like a point of view thing. And
right. Yeah.
And it's a name. So
it's a name, yeah. And well, of course, you have people that just think negatively about PHP in general, and then it's adding PHP and Electron, so like the worst two things ever happened to computers.
Well, yes, but on the other hand, these are also two of the biggest things that happen in computing. So
right, yeah, that was also more irony. So
yeah, I once heard this talk where someone said that for JavaScript to become as popular as it is today, it had to suck, because if it didn't suck, people wouldn't have started to fight it and come up with crazy ideas, and it would have never grown into what we know today. So, and I think PHP is pretty similar. So yeah, I saw the Reddit post, and there were a couple of negative comments, but I'm just checking right now. It also has 91 upvotes, which for the PHP subreddit is pretty well. So I know some people on Reddit, they like to complain in the comments, but there's also like this minor silent majority rather that just upvotes and likes it. So I would say for Reddit standards, it's actually pretty well received.
Okay.
At least from my point of view. So and I think on Hacker News it also got quite a lot of upvotes, right?
I actually haven't seen that. No.
Yeah, it was. Let me double check now. I'm curious. Hacker News on it's loading native PHP. Yeah. It got 179 points, which is good. That's the front page of Hacker News. So
cool.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nice. I was also wondering, you've had Laracon now. This is what you were working towards to live up to the hype, and I think you did. But what are the next steps, and what's your vision like long term with native PHP?
So like the immediate next steps is finishing the missing parts of the documentation that didn't make the cut for Laracon. And then like the like one of the bigger pieces of the puzzle that's still missing is when you bundle the application, then we have to ship the PHP source code along with your app, because as you said, the PHP code doesn't get compiled to anything natively. So in order to run your application, your actual PHP code lives inside of the application that you ship to someone.
Yeah.
Which also means that if someone right-clicks on your app, they can just get access to all the source code.
Yeah.
And like this has been the same for Electron applications for years, but for JavaScript we have obfuscators. And uglifiers and stuff like that. But we don't have this for PHP because on the server, we just don't need it.
Yeah.
So this is something that I would really like to solve, because the way this is right now, native PHP just isn't good for commercial applications, because you would just expose your entire source code, very readable. And so Ryan Chandler is working on an obfuscator. I haven't seen any code yet, but he mentioned that he already did quite some work on this previously. So I'm really excited to see what he comes up with. And also some people, I forgot his name, sorry, but someone contributed like a Laravel package that encrypts the source code and then decrypts it at runtime using a pretty clever solution that involves like compiling a custom PHP extension that holds the private key using like random variable names so that you can't decrypt it easily. Just adds another layer of obfuscation to it. So that's like something I'd really like to solve, because then native PHP apps can also be used for like anything that you want to sell or distribute where you don't want to expose your source code.
Yeah. So at that point, do you plan on using it yourself, because you have quite a lot of apps written in Electron now?
Yeah, a lot of people asked me if I, for example, would rewrite Tinkerwell in native PHP, and like from a business standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense to rewrite it, because we spent like, I think the Electron app is now 4 years old, and we have fixed so many small bugs, and just we know how to work around certain things in Electron, in Tinkerwell. It doesn't make any sense for us to rewrite it with native PHP. But I would at least like to be at a point where if I would like to create a new app, using native PHP is what I would choose. So, but at least right now, I don't have any new app ideas. Herd requires maintenance, requires updates, all of our existing apps, and native PHP also needs to be developed some more.
Okay, cool. I had one more like general question, not necessarily related to native PHP, but maybe a little bit. You've mentioned already you like to explore the weird parts of PHP and its ecosystem. I'm also curious to learn whether you have a vision for PHP itself and its ecosystem, its community, where the language is heading for the next couple of years, the next decade. Do you have like any thoughts or feelings about that?
Yeah, I really hope that the PHP language and the core team and the community can grow some more with the PHP Foundation, which is in place now, which everyone should sponsor and contribute to. So I'm really excited to see, because I think it was a bit more on hold for the first year, and now they are starting to hire more people. So I'm really excited to see what this adds to the language itself. Then the whole RFC process, I'm hoping that also what you started building,
like
that
the RFC vote thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That this can be somehow improved in the future. Also, Ryan Chandler is working on something really exciting, which is called PXP, which is like a like Babel for PHP, like a PHP preprocessor. And like I really hope that this mindset can change, that we would accept something like a preprocessor, because this would add a lot of benefit to the language, in my opinion, so that, for example, stuff that like new features can be evaluated before they go into RFC, or an RFC process can take a look at, okay, this is used by like it does with Babel and JavaScript in general, that we see how many people are using this. Well, maybe it makes sense to add it to the language by giving people the ability to use it before it actually gets PR'd.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for PXP and to see if it can be adopted in the language.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I don't know if you heard, but one of the major problems with supersets and preprocessors is that it should have proper editor and IDE integration. And I know Ryan was working. Yeah, well, but so you haven't heard yet. Ryan is working on like a language server protocol implementation for PXP, so that it works in VS Code. But with the PHP Storm release, it's actually coming out today when we're recording this. We also have LSP support. So that means that PXP will actually, if Ryan manages to like get everything working, of course, I hope he will. The PXP will have VS Code support, but also PHP Storm support. Which I think is pretty big. It might actually be like the first attempt that actually has a chance of succeeding here.
I also think that this needs to be solved in order for people to use it.
So I'm also pretty happy about it. I'm glad that you mentioned it as one of the things you hope PHP may grow.
And besides that, because I've been dealing with so many PHP extensions for both native PHP and Herd. I really hope that at some point in the future we can, I don't know, simplify extension development or demystify it, because like it's this only the selected few, at least that's what it feels like to me, only the selected few know about how to actually write an extension that does something like Xdebug. I know this is a very advanced thing, but the documentation about extensions is pretty dated. I guess it hasn't changed that much, but I would love to see, I don't know, something around extension development. And similar to PXP, I feel like extensions in the community seem to be something that people are afraid of or don't tend to like to use. And that's also something that I'd like to see changed, because if we could just install an extension via Composer, for example, people wouldn't have this feeling of, oh, this changes my server, who knows what happens to the language and stuff like that. So I think extensions are amazing and they should be used more. And people should explore more what is actually possible with them.
Actually, I'm just thinking aloud here, but when you install an extension, it has to be compiled against the current PHP installation. But after that, it's referenced in your PHP ini file. So maybe there is a way already to be able to require extensions via Composer, have it compile once on your system, and then dynamically link to it, because you can change PHP ini settings and you can even load extensions at runtime. So, but I agree that like it's too difficult and there's too high an entry barrier for people at this point.
Yeah, there have been like I don't know the proper pronunciation, Zephyr, whatever.
Zephyr, yeah.
Zephyr, yeah. They tried to lower it by being able to write extensions in PHP.
Yeah,
which is great. So, yeah.
Yeah, so some interesting thoughts. Let's see where it heads. I definitely think that the foundation has potential to help in this regard as well. So
yeah,
cool. Well, Marcel, that's about all the questions I have for you today. I appreciate that you wanted to talk about this, and I think it's a really cool project. And I think the biggest takeaway here is for me at least is how inspiring it is to people, and how it like opened a new world basically. And I mean, we can discuss the name and we can discuss like performance and whatnot, but in the end, lots of people are trying new things out today with PHP, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for investing your time in that, and I'm looking forward to see.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun to chat with you about it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Marcel. I'll make sure to leave some links to like your company website and Native PHP in the description. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.